Welcome back to the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media columnist for the Sports Business Journal. And we're back. John, a lot to do as we get really into 2022. We'll go on the way up, on the way down. Topics today: Ken Rosenthal done at MLB Network. The NFL, what are they calling it? It's a super weekend, this regular season weekend. ESPN Bowls and Kirk Herbstreit's comments about them. Rachel Nichols and ESPN officially done. And what could she do next? NBC Network shuttered. USA started up with their soccer, some nice ratings for them. And then we didn't really get a chance to do this. We'd already recorded the podcast for, look ahead, but we will look back at John Madden's career as well, and it'll be part of our calls of the week. So John, excited to be back doing the pod for this full year. We got started last year, but I'm excited to be back talking with you.
Let's go. It's a new year. Let's just start right up with who's up, who's down.
Who's up, who's down?
All right, John, let me go first. My who's up, John Ourand.
I can't wait to hear this one.
You blasted me once with a who's down, but look, again, I'm the nice guy on this podcast. You're the meanie. Let's look at the prediction you made last week about 2022.
This is not a prediction for 2022. This is a prediction for 2024. There have been a lot of stories that Disney wants to spin off ESPN, and where there's smoke, there's fire. They've certainly looked into that. It's going to happen at some point. Think 2024. Right before the NBA negotiations take place. ESPN desperately wants to keep the NBA. You have some of these big digital companies that want to get the NBA. My call of the year, 2024, Apple wants to get involved. They're going to buy ESPN from Disney, and that's going to be Apple's entry into sports. Apple will then be the biggest sports media company, including your Amazon, in the country.
You say Apple will eventually buy ESPN. So look, I'm not reporting this, so I want to make that clear, but I did talk to a top executive in the know. And the way this person put it to me is that people this year, it's really going to go into overdrive. The idea of ESPN spinning off. He thinks everyone's going to line up to talk to Disney and see what they can do. Here's the thing that I wanted to add. Disney is not going to relinquish ESPN fully. Now, could they bring somebody in to be a partner with them? Yes, but the person's feeling was that ESPN, cable fees, they still bring in too much money for Disney to really separate themselves from ESPN. And I will add this. I don't think Apple is going to be the one personally, if this does eventually happen. And again, I'm not saying this is definitely happening. I'm just saying this is going to be a story. This person thought this is the biggest story of this year. But I do think when you look at it, it does make some sense that Disney keeps the fees that they're getting from cable and then maybe partners, and ESPN is run as a separate company. I do think that's possible. Again, not reporting that. I'm just kind of adding to the speculation, a little bit informed speculation, I think, with this one, John.
There's a ton that I want to add there. We're at who's up, who's down. Let's add that to the topic list.
All right, sounds good. All right, who do you have on the way up?
My on the way up is Greg Sankey. He is the commissioner of the SEC. He was named commissioner back in 2015, and he has never seen a college football championship without one of his schools participating in it. The SEC, they've been in the last 7 championships. The semifinals this year, both SEC schools won by at least 3 touchdowns. They weren't even competitive games. Only Clemson has broken up that logjam in terms of who has actually won the CFP championship. They've won 4. They're guaranteed to win 5 this year. And it's not for Sankey and the SEC. It's not just football. The SEC is a football conference, right? Men's basketball, 5 teams are in the top 25. Women's basketball, 6 teams, including the number 1 ranked South Carolina Gamecocks. I don't know what Sankey is doing down there, but it's working.
Yeah, dude, does anybody go to class? They're always practicing.
You know what? I do not know what the GPAs are of those teams. That's a good point.
Doesn't matter. The numbers that matter. What did ESPN pay? $325 for the SEC package that starts in 24.
Yeah, they make the most money. We'll see what happens with the Big Ten this year, but the SEC under Sankey they're sitting pretty for good reason.
Real quick, I don't think the Big Ten's going to beat the SEC number. Do you?
It all depends on competition, and there's a lot more competition right now. You're going to have CBS going after the Big Ten, Fox going after the Big Ten, ESPN going after the Big Ten. Who knows what the Discovery, Warner Media is going to do in terms of college sports? So I think there's a good shot that the Big Ten is going to break the bank.
Now, on the way down, who do you got?
On the way down, well, last year it was on the way down. It was Chris Ripley of Sinclair. This year, I really could end up being Nielsen CEO David Kenny. He's the person that top TV network executives are so frustrated with. Just before Christmas, he put out a memo admitting that, hey, Nielsen is undercounting all of the out-at-home viewers. Well, this undercount, out-of-home viewers, by the way, those are all literally people viewing television outside the home, be it at a friend's house, a bar, a hotel. That wasn't just a little mistake. It's a mistake that potentially cost networks tens of millions of dollars in ad sales revenue in terms of how much they can charge. I really want to like Nielsen. I think Nielsen provides a service for the business. I think that they give a nice snapshot to us about sports that are popular on television and not. But it has tripped over itself at almost every level in terms of counting streaming numbers, in terms of counting these out-of-home viewers. Something called the Media Ratings Council. It suspended Nielsen's accreditation a couple of months ago. Networks like NBC, they're scrambling to find somebody else to count their viewers so they can go to the ad market to do it. So one thing seems certain. This year, this should have been a prediction of mine. This year, it's virtually certain that Nielsen's monopoly in this space is going to end.
Wow, that is big in the TV universe because Nielsen's been around forever. The ratings, I deal with them a lot in radio with WFAN and ESPN New York, which also goes through Nielsen, and they do have a monopoly on this. And it's interesting, like the stream, for example, you could literally see how many people are streaming, but instead of just kind of counting the people up, it's done through Nielsen's formula.
Yeah, Nielsen has a sample, and for decades, the cable operators, they know to the person who's watching shows and when, and they're able to count it that way. And sometimes, if you talk to cable operator executives, they say our numbers are nowhere near where Nielsen's numbers are. It's something's going to change.
All right, let me do my who's down. Chris Fowler. Now, Chris Fowler, he did 4 games in 11 days. And then this weekend, he's doing the NFL weekend game, one of the games on ABC ESPN that they added for Saturdays. And then he's doing the national championship on Monday. Good for him. We don't need to hear him Instagramming how grueling a time it is. Chris, 4 games in 11 days is not grueling. Yes, they're big games. They're on national TV. I get it. He does an okay job. Like I said before, McDonough's a better play-by-play guy in terms of football, but we don't have to hear how difficult. Nobody wants to hear this. All announcers out there, nobody, again, the job, I have total respect for play-by-play people. It's a more difficult job than people realize. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of studying. You're on national TV. Now with social media, everyone's critiquing you, a lot of pressure. But people work every day, 5 days a week. Some people work 7 days a week. Nobody wants to hear how it's tough and hard that you have four games in 11 days, probably flying private jets to these games, a lot of them. Nobody wants to hear it. It's a dream job. Just don't Instagram that stuff. It's not that hard. It's too much. I always get this, Joe Buck, again, he does more games, but in October, we always hear about Joe Buck.
Oh my God, if we get another pitch on like, hey, do you know how many games they're doing? We're not working in salt mines here, guys.
They know not to pitch me on that. I don't care how many games he's doing. I used to cover baseball beat. Give me a break. All right. People work way, and listen, that's a dream job too. So people work way harder. Nobody wants to hear about your sports. You're at the game calling it. No one cares. Keep it to yourself. Tell your wife, your best friend, tell anybody else. Don't tell the world. So that's my who's down.
I like that one. All right, let's get into the topics, Andrew.
All right. Topic 1.
the biggest story that hit my social feeds, the most read story at sportsbusinessjournal.com is your story on MLB Network dropping Ken Rosenthal. The move came about a year and a half after he was critical, not really even that critical, but a little bit critical of MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred. And in terms of reading your story on that, that really seemed to be tied together. Walk us through what you know, Andrew.
Yeah, so the story, which of course first was on the NewYorkPost.com website, and then you guys took it from there.
Thank you. We got a lot of traffic off that. Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome. Yeah, look at me hooking you guys up. It did well for us as well. I think it was the number one trend on Twitter at one point. Ken Rosenthal is very popular. The commissioner of baseball, especially during a lockout, is not very popular. That's obvious. So when something like this happens, I think you put those two things together. There was a lot of interest, especially in like the media community. So the summer of 2020, Ken Rosenthal, who also is a columnist for The Athletic, wrote a column basically saying that for his legacy and to do the right thing, Rob Manfred needed to make sure the season wasn't postponed or canceled when we were at the beginning stages of the pandemic, and that was in question. And that did not go over well. Some other columns that Rosenthal has written, again, he's kind of an even-handed writer as a columnist, but those haven't gone over so great with people at Major League Baseball. And this is where you have people who aren't journalists involved, or at least don't have a background in media as much in terms of dealing with content. When Tony Petitti, former CBS executive, was running MLB Network, I don't think this flowed down. It stopped with Petitti. He understood it. He'd been at CBS forever. You get, the NFL complaining, you get this one complaining. You learn how to deal with things like that when the commissioner doesn't like it. And you can understand, like everyone's like, well, he's thin skin. Nobody likes to be criticized, especially when they're in power, and especially when they're basically cutting somebody a check, because even though they have some great reporters, you still are working for Major League Baseball if you're working at one of these networks. Same thing at NFL Network and the NBA as well. So it's an unholy relationship. So you can understand why that could upset the person. But the thing that to me is so short-sighted, and where it's just the idea that this won't get out, number one, is one thing. Number two is no one would care about this Athletic column. It doesn't sway the universe. There are plenty of people saying nice things about, well, not that many, but there are some people saying nice things about Rob Manfred. And then there are a lot of people that had the same opinion as Ken Rosenthal. I just don't think silencing that opinion is good for Rob Manfred. It's not good for MLB Network. And I just don't think it's smart long-term.
Oh, it's an awful look. There are probably 5 different tentacles to this story that we can go with, but I want to start with one. You and I were reporting back in December when Rob McClary left MLB Network. He was the president of MLB Network. He left. To me, it seemed rather sudden. He'd been there from the start. I talked with Rob at the All-Star game. He seemed to be happy and content where he was. He was replaced by Bill Morningstar. Now this happened sort of, right afterwards. Do we need to go and re-report sort of what happened with that, Andrew?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know. There might be more there. I don't personally know if there is. I do think, though, what they're trying to do with MLB Network is different. Like, would not surprise me if it leans more into gambling in the future. It has one show right now, but I wouldn't be surprised. I do think they want to try to get younger than they've been, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But the one thing I guess that these networks, and I get it for these billionaire owners and a commissioner who's very powerful, it's hard to understand. You can't necessarily point a straight line between Ken Rosenthal's salary, and he probably was making close to 7 figures, or at least 500,000, probably more, I'd say, from MLB Network. But there is a credibility that you need to have. And a guy like Rosenthal, and this is what the Schefters and Woj and Rappaports, et cetera, what they do is they infuse oxygen into your programming, give it a sense of urgency. Now, listen, they have some great insider. Joel Sherman's the best, maybe the best person I've ever worked with. He's at the Post. John Heyman is very good. Verducci, Morosi, Feinstein, they have a bunch of people. That said, Rosenthal might be the best there is. And so again, I wouldn't, if you're baseball, I don't know why you wouldn't want to be in the business with Ken Rosenthal. But to me, that's like, he gives you so much credibility and he adds to your programming. He's actually, and this is a bigger skill than people I think realize, for writers to be good on TV. He's good on TV. It's a little more difficult, as we're proving when we talk on our videos, how hard it is. See, not anybody can do it. You're like, yeah, you're right about that one.
My daughter points out every stutter that I make, Andrew. I mean, come on.
Exactly. It's a little hard. So, and he's good on TV. So I don't really see that. Even if you want to get more diverse, get younger, if you're MLB Network, that's understandable. I would not do it at the expense of Ken Rosenthal. To me, that's not good business, not smart.
Well, one of the themes last year and one of the themes certainly for this year's pod is going to be about the downfall of the RSNs and how the RSNs are, they're losing distribution, and where that cable operators are dropping them, satellite operators are dropping them. What we haven't talked about are these league-owned networks. MLB Network, according to Nielsen, they're in 47 million homes right now. When it launched, it was the most successful launch ever. Back in 2009, it was close to 70 million homes. So they've lost, 25 million homes just about over a span of 5 years. I'm not sure when the slide actually started. If they were paying, seven figures, we don't know what they were paying, but high price talent, like all of a sudden, like they're dealing with the same cost structures there. Somebody who is taking shots, I'm using air quotes if you can look at the video, but taking shots at the commissioner and commanding a high salary for a platform where they're going to have to cut costs. That appears to me to be what MLB was doing here.
I will say, you could also see what they've done. They've consolidated production with the NHL Network, and it's been a change there, a sea change of how things are done. I just think there's some unhappiness there in terms of the direction of the network, and this doesn't help. I just think you want to be a straight shooter. You got to be trusted. It's not a great look for MLB Network. And I do think it's interesting that you bring up that, because, anytime Moffett, Nathanson comes out with their prediction about, cable and the bundle going down, it's always ESPN, as if like none of these other networks collect fees. Obviously, ESPN collects by far the most and is the most important in the sports space. But these smaller places, that's where the bundle, as you know better than I do, that's why the bundle made sense, because it supported these smaller places because they're involved in the bundle. When the bundle starts to unwind even more, it's really, I think, these smaller networks that will be effective as just as much, if not more, than ESPN, even though ESPN is obviously going to be the focus because they're the biggest and the most important.
Yeah, back in the heyday of MLB Network, they had a couple of wild card games exclusively on MLB Network, and that was powerful. The cable operators thought, well, we can't lose even one MLB playoff game. Now, one wild card game, go stream it illegally. But one other area that I kind of want to go here is I have so much respect for Ken Rosenthal. He covered the Orioles back in the team's heyday. I've been reading him for decades. He's a fabulous reporter. He's really good at his craft. And I think you see this also at NBA TV, and you see it at NFL Network. Once you get in with a league-owned network or a team-owned sort of media position, it changes a little bit. And so his criticism, which, as I read it, was totally mild criticism. What you pointed to in your story in the New York Post. It's hard for established journalists and established reporters to ply their craft for a league-owned or a team-owned media outlet.
All right, let's move to topic 2. The NFL, they added another week to their season. They added games on ESPN and ABC on Saturday. John, your takeaway, you wrote about it in your newsletter that comes out every Monday for the Sports Business Journal. What is your takeaway in terms of the new look for this final week?
The first week 18 in NFL history, Andrew. Look, what's different about this is the games that they put on ABC and ESPN. And they had to come up with games that were going to matter for ABC and ESPN, but they also had to come up with games that the results wouldn't necessarily hurt the games that were scheduled for Sunday. And so they came up with a Dallas-Philadelphia game, that's going to be in prime time. They came up with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They're playing Denver. And what I think to be particularly interesting about that, those are two good games for ESPN on Saturday. Fox and CBS, they're not thrilled about losing a Cowboys game or a Patrick Mahomes game going into a Sunday. And I think that this is what happens when you spread the schedule out on the final week.
Yeah, there are only so many good games, which kind of segues into topic 3. Kirk Herbstreit's comments, John, in which he basically questioned some college athletes' desire to play in bowl games. Now he's been on cleanup on aisle 3 doing various podcasts.
He tried to clean that up almost right away.
He tweeted, now he's cleaned it up. Let's just listen to a little bit of what Herbstreit said.
What's the difference as a player in saying these games are meaningless when, Des, we played in quote unquote meaningless games? I mean, I know you guys were here a lot, but I just don't understand. If you don't make it to the playoff, how is it meaningless to play football and compete? Isn't that what we do as football players? We compete. So I don't know if changing and expanding it is going to change anything. I really don't. I think this era of player just doesn't love football.
Here's one of the issues. There's many issues here, but number one is ESPN has all these bowl games. Okay, they're the ones who make these games. I'm going to say they don't feel as special. Like, what ESPN deserves amazing credit for is their tonnage. But I do think sometimes because of that tonnage, they lack the ability sometimes to make an individual game feel as special as some other networks who don't have to focus. Like, for example, NBC does a great job on Sunday Night Football. It's the only game NBC does each week on the NFL, and they only have one college game. ESPN's doing a million games. These college games do not feel that special. So athletes who have a chance to play in the NFL have one game left and say, you know what, I'm not going to play. I think the proper take to me is it's a person's decision what they want to make for themselves and their family, not they don't care about the game as much as we did in the past. It's that stuff is always, I find that always BS. And it does sound like, an old man yelling at the cloud stuff.
Yeah, I do want to push back on you in terms of old man yelling at the cloud. I think these games are totally special. And I think that you can take a look at the audiences that are watching it. These games, some of the worst games, are getting over 3 million viewers. Maryland, 6-6 Maryland Terrapins are playing a 6-6 Virginia Tech Hokies in New York in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday, and it was a blowout game, and that got over 2 million viewers, including my household. My household helped those ratings. People are tuning into them. It's not like when we grew up and you had a New Year's Day and you kind of like that felt different.
But I'm not really arguing that, John. Like, I'm not arguing that they shouldn't have all these games. It's fine. You can have all these games, but the idea that all these games are special is why you can understand that if you're not playing for the national championship, you're not in the playoffs. Like, again, I kind of feel like I would maybe play. But again, it's not my family that has a chance to make millions of dollars. So it's hard to say exactly. So I think it's very understandable. And if you were Kirk Herbstreit coming out of Ohio State, or when Desmond Howard came out of Michigan, I mean, he was a Heisman Trophy winner, but if you are going to be the top pick in the draft and there's one game, you're one game away from making that reality happening. I mean, I remember as a kid, University of Miami, I was a huge Hurricane fan. Melvin Bratton ripped his knee up, I believe, in the game that was basically the national championship back then. Obviously there wasn't a playoff, but that guy lost a lot of money. That's just, his career was changed and the knee surgeries weren't as effective back then. So you can understand it. And I guess the thing that's being exposed, and I think if you're someone who talks about or writes about college football or college basketball, is that everybody's making money except the most important people for the games, who are the players. Everyone's making money. You just said ESPN's getting how much money is ESPN making? How much do they spend? How much is going to the colleges? Obviously, this is a whole new world and it's changing more, but it is ludicrous. And I think an education that you get in theory is very is great if you get that for free. But the idea that this isn't paid labor, talk to a D1 athlete ever and what their life is like. This, or I should say, unpaid labor. They deserve to make it okay for their livelihood, just the same way Herbstreit and everyone else who talks about it and analyzes it and is making millions of dollars to talk about it. The idea that now you're saying, well, that guy doesn't care about football. Well, he probably is torn. I'm sure most athletes are torn about the decision, and it's a difficult one. And they get advice from certain people to say, you know what, you should sit this out. You're too close to becoming a professional. And yes, you can make the case. And Scott Van Pelt made a good point that what's the difference between this game and game 7? And he's right. There isn't really a difference. You could stop after game 7 if you knew you're going to be a number 1 pick. But the point being is that it came across, and this is why he got crushed so much, is because it came across so hypocritical.
Let me defend Kirk Herbstreit for a quick second here. And I'm going to go all Chris Fowler on you, Andrew.
Instagram, 4 games and 4 podcasts in 11 days. Could we do it?
Herbstreit, he called the Georgia-Michigan game from the Orange Bowl on New Year's Eve. I don't know when he flew to LA and the Rose Bowl, but it was at 7 a.m. He's sitting on a set, and he said something that he retracted on Twitter and on TV later on as he started to blow up. I mean, I don't understand why you couldn't get. ESPN has a lot of good college analysts. Why can't you put somebody else on the Rose Bowl or put somebody else on the Orange Bowl? I'm not sure why they needed to have that happen.
No, that's an excellent point, and I agree with it totally. That he could be, but he hasn't said that. Like I would agree with that, but he really hasn't. He hasn't said, you know what, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I misspoke. I wish I could have that one back. He said, no, he basically, at least what I've seen is I'm talking about some people, not everybody. It was maybe too general, but 2 things there. Your overall point is throwing Herbstreit at everything. I don't think that's a good strategy. Personally, I don't like the idea of Fowler and Herbstreit one day being the Monday Night Football or doing the Super Bowl. To me, that's not a good plan. I just don't think that's where their expertise is. Fowler's an okay play-by-player. Herbstreit, it becomes too much. He's excellent. You know, I've always been a Herbstreit guy. He's very good on air, and overall, I like him. But your point is right that they're spread too thin. Before we move off this topic, I do want to give credit to Timothy Burke at Bubba Prague on Twitter, because he's the one who kind of really gave this thing life off of his very active Twitter, where he has a lot of videos that are very helpful for people who are interested in sports media. So I do want to give him credit.
He's a great Twitter follower, and he made that point too about Herbstreit going all the way across the country, which I completely agree with.
Exactly. So he's not breaking a story there, but he's the one who really made it happen, becoming such a big deal. I'm sure Herbstreit really appreciated that. Anyways, all right. Speaking of appreciating things, topic 4.
Another story that you've been all over, Andrew. Rachel Nichols finally unwinding from ESPN. Tell us what's happening there.
Yeah, so she's officially done with ESPN. A settlement was completed. She had a year left on her contract. According to my sources, she was making somewhere in the neighborhood between 1.5 and 2 million. So I think in that 1.7 range. If she got more money, if there's a non-disparagement clause, I don't know. I definitely think that ESPN wouldn't have signed off without a non-disparagement clause. I think the idea that she's going to have any legal battle with them is probably out the door too. There are indications that both sides were happy with how this ended. Not the whole circumstance. They're definitely unhappy with what transpired over the last 2 years. But in terms of them, she's able now to go and get another job and try a professional comeback. I think if you look at everything, I do believe personally that she deserves that. I think if you look at the overall what went down, I know internally she wasn't so popular. She could be a little bit of a bulldog, which you need as a reporter, which she was her, where she started, and to get to the top at ESPN. The reason it's so interesting to cover places like that is because it is a little bit Game of Thrones-ish. So those qualities aren't necessarily bad in terms of trying to get to those places, but at the end, she didn't have as many friends as she needed to maybe survive that situation. But now she gets a chance to maybe do something else. I don't know yet what that is. I know you're gonna say, what is she gonna do? I don't know yet what that is.
So speculation is she was a top ESPN basketball NBA person. The speculation is that she could go to NBA TV. Almost certainly not Turner. I can't think. But I think it's an unanswerable question until we talk to Rachel about this, because I think she can do pretty much anything. I mean, she grew up as a reporter. I know we're now viewing her in an NBA lens, but like she started at the Washington Post. She can cover anything. She can take that bulldog nature and end up pretty much anywhere.
I do find it funny, and I do say this to ESPN top people. They loved her until they didn't. Like I always heard the jump. You want to write about the jump? You want to write about the jump? They pushed
the jump. They did. Cafardo pushing the jump. I'm like, enough of the jump then.
And then then all of a sudden it was like, see you later. So that's the Rachel Nichols story. All right, let's move. Topic 5. NBCSN shuttered now officially. USA Network starts with the Premier League. USA Network first weekend out. Very good ratings for USA Network. People were able to find it, actually even improvement from year to year in terms of what the numbers were. That's a good sign for USA. And that's not surprising to me. I do think Premier League and soccer fans are accustomed to be like, wait, where's the game? And trying to find it. So the idea that people would find USA Network, especially because you went to NBCSN, it said, go to USA Network.
Go to USA.
Exactly. So you'd have to be a brain surgeon to figure it out. That said, I think that is a good sign for their plan.
Cable operators were paying at least 50 cents per subscriber for that message to send them to USA. That doesn't surprise me.
Are they really paying, or do we not pay for that anymore? How's that work?
No, it's done. The contract is over. They pulled it as of January 1st. The beauty of the USA for a big league like the Premier League is the hardcore fans, they're going to find it no matter what. At USA, they're going to be able to bring in a lot more casual fans that kind of want to go to USA. And USA is one of the top ranked cable channels that's out there. It's something that we don't talk about a lot here because it's generally serials or drama or things along those lines. But they're going to be able to expand their audience over at USA, and the idea that those ratings went up doesn't surprise me at all. Where it's going to hurt is for these really second, third tier level, the car shows that ended NBCSN's run. Those aren't going to find a home on USA. USA really wants the top the sports like Premier League to migrate over there, and everything else is going to go to Peacock.
I really enjoyed the Winter Classic on
that was
Turner.
Great. What was it? 6 below? Or
yeah, it was 8 below. It was freezing there. And as we're talking, I'm looking up the numbers from your colleague Austin Karp here on Twitter.
Shout out for Austin Karp. I love it.
1.4 million viewers for the first NHL Winter Classic on TNT. He wrote the lowest Winter Classic yet, previously on NBC, of course. Little publicity, he said, with COVID, all but shutting down the NHL in recent weeks. And then the best regular season game on cable, the best game since St. Louis, since 1/2/17. He got a little long here, Austin. Let's keep these tweets a little shorter here at the end here. Twin City since 2/21/16. But overall, good tweet. 1 point. Give me it, and then we're gonna go on next topic. What do you think? 1.4 million. If you're the NHL, you happy with that? If you're Turner, you happy with it? Give me your take on that.
Turner, I'm happy. NHL, they're in this for the long haul, so they're not going to obsess over one. And the idea that the numbers are down going from NBC broadcast to a cable channel is the least surprising thing that we're going to talk about on the pod.
You know what? Yeah, the least surprising thing would be that you didn't say anything bad about Sinclair and
I did in the open. I was down. I had to get my jab in.
Oh yeah, good point. All right, so that's not at least right. You know what? I'm not gonna do it today, but I'm hearing some things about Sinclair that actually are kind of interesting and that I like. I'm not ready to just some reporting I'm doing, but that some things that are interesting that they might be doing that. Just gonna tease that out there. Okay, let's go back to the topic you want to talk a little bit more about. I mentioned that ESPN, the idea of maybe being some kind of spinoff where Disney remains in control of ESPN, but there's partners involved, and they get someone gets some equity in ESPN, maybe runs ESPN, but Disney's still going to collect from the teats of ESPN. Give me your take on that.
So this goes back, Andrew, to the arguments that we've been having about Amazon and whether Amazon is big in sports. I said Apple. It could be Google. It could be Amazon. It could be Apple. My point is that big tech they're looking into sports in a big way. I picked Apple because they have a sports division. It's headed up by Jim DiLorenzo, who came from Amazon. And at some point, they're going to want to jump in. And when they jump in, they're not going to jump in with, let's dabble with MLS rights. When they jump in, they're going to jump in a big way because they have the pocketbook to do that. And so when I look at when these guys are going to get big in the sports business, it's about buying a Fox Sports or an ESPN. ESPN has set itself up very well with ESPN Plus in order to be attractive. That's not why they did it, to be attractive to the big tech companies, but it has made them much more attractive to the big tech companies. So nothing's going to happen imminently.
Because the person I spoke to felt like things might really heat up this year.
Really? They think it'll be in 2022.
I don't know if a sale will happen, but that they're just going to be taking meetings a lot and really trying to figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. They already have been taking meetings on things like this to see what's out there. I mean, it was well reported. I believe Robert Iger talked about it in his book, where he talked with Steve Jobs about actually merging the two companies, Apple and Disney, at one point. These meetings happen all the time.
True. Sometimes things go quick though. You never know. Maybe we'll have something fast. Sometimes that happens in these dealings. All right, topic 7, John Madden. We're also going to incorporate our calls of the week as we finish up here.
Call of the week.
We both grew up on watching John Madden. Listen, he's gotten a Heroes of Goodbye from Fox, CBS, NBC, ABC, ESPN. Everybody has given Madden the proper send-off. He was innovative. He was different. And I think for my call of the week, the thing that sticks out is when he was at his peak. He was amazing. This is from when Barry Switzer was the coach of the Cowboys, and he decided to go for it late in a tie game. I think his own 20 or something, or maybe 30-yard line. And Madden was just the analysis here is just it's perfect.
I'm still surprised the Cowboys are going for it again. I think that was a bad call the first time they did it. I think it's a bad call now.
It's 4th, and it's still a foot. Emmitt Smith is still deep with Darrell Johnston in front of him. Same play. Didn't get it again. That's unbelievable. This is unbelievable. What in the heck is going on? The score's tied. You're on the road. Woo. I don't know. There's no place here. I mean, this is short yardage defense. The Eagles are selling out against the run. They have everyone up. They just read the thing. There's no chance. There's no chance to get that ball in there against that defense. The linebackers come fill the hole. The defensive backs are in the hole.
The line controlled the line of scrimmage, but still, even that call, I mean, when you're in that area on the field, you have to punt the ball. I thought they got that call, that 2-minute warning. I thought they dodged a bullet, and then they go back and punt, and they did the same thing.
Same play, same result.
Yeah, they deserve to lose.
Yeah, so that's John Madden at his peak, and obviously you have the video game, and then the coaching career, the Super Bowls. So a Hall of Famer.
You know what's great about your clip is that, first of all, he had the gravitas to do that. He's a Super Bowl winning coach, and so he was able to say it in a way that registered with the viewers. But secondly, he didn't do that every game. He didn't pull it out like, oh, that's the worst call ever. So when he said that, it really mattered. Like it was very natural, and it didn't feel like a producer was in his ear saying like, you got to get out there and say something unusual.
No, and that's the thing. He did come across very genuine, and he loved the game. And the people who he worked with, all who started as young producers and all types of positions. Eric Shanks, who's now running Fox Sports, was one. Like, they all learned so much from being around Madden and in the football aspect of it. Fred Gaudelli has spoken about it when he produced him with Sunday Night Football, and just there's a passion. And analysts out there, especially ones making a lot of money, they should look at that and too the care he took. He cared about the replays, and that is something. Some guys just want to show up and do games. You got to care about what you're doing, and Madden really cared about the product.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you, so I remember at Madden as a Super Bowl winning coach. I remember him on the sidelines. He was just so different. Like, you have Tom Landry with the fedora and the coat and tie, and then you had Madden. The hair was unrumpled, and just like he was in the broadcast booth. He turned into, I think we both agree, the best NFL analyst in television history. No?
NFL analyst, best in television history. I'd probably go yes. I do think Cosell is in that argument. I think we all have our personal favorites. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I love Bob Trumpy. I was a Trumpy guy. But yeah, I think you'd have to go Madden if you're going to put somebody number one. I think it's probably obviously Madden.
We have John Madden, Super Bowl winning coach, brilliant football mind. Maybe not a brilliant football mind, but a very good football
I think
mind.
Brilliant football mind's fair.
But he also had a personality, and he was able to connect with the viewers. So your clip was showing how good he was at analyzing a game. My clip is showing how good he was at connecting with viewers.
The guy goes unabated. That's a new word, unabated. That's kind of too big a word. That's like mayonnaise. That's the biggest word I know.
That's great. Unabated as a big word for Madden. I mean, it's just, even now, like, I've heard that clip now 4 or 5 times, and I laugh every time. Like a big word like mayonnaise. Like, how can those aren't big words, John. But he is somebody, and that is so unique. And you hear TV executives talk about this all the time. The ratings are going to be big regardless of the announcers if games are close. It's when games are blowouts and people start to go away, and he was able to keep fans watching. And he's able to keep fans watching not because of your clip, because like the games weren't close, so there wasn't a lot to analyze. It was due to my clip and sort of his being able to connect with the audience and be an entertainer and just have fun, and that fun just comes right through the screen.
Yeah, and I think, to me, like, I didn't know. I talked to him maybe a couple of times, interviewed him a few times one-on-one, but I didn't really know him very well. But to me, hearing people who worked with him and the way he apparently treated everyone on his production team, knew everyone's name, was interested in their lives, to me, I'm more interested in that than all the success and the Hall of Fame and the money. Is how you treat people. And to me, that is, everyone can have that legacy. And that seemed to be part of his, just hearing, and he was demanding. I think he was very demanding of how people were expected to work, because he wanted to be top notch, like he was coaching a team, but he treated people well, which to me is the best compliment you could probably give anyone, including John Madden, if you treat people the right way.
Yeah. One final thing that I want to mention about Madden. I think the thing I love the most about him, when he retired and put his feet up, you didn't hear from him again. And I can tell you, I spent the past 5 years pitching hard to do a profile on Madden. And he had no interest. And if you talk to people at CBS or Fox, the fact that he agreed with Fox to do that documentary was really unique, because he said no to everybody. CBS wanted him as part of their Super Bowl in Super Bowl 50, which was in San Francisco, his backyard. And he was like, no, I've been out of the game. People don't want to hear from me. He was very humble about that. And when he left, he totally left and was not coming back in.
Yeah, that was good. So condolences to his family and everyone listening who was friends with John and also who just liked his work. So that was a tough one for everybody, but he did get a beautiful send-off for John Madden after 85 years, really an amazing life. And last thing for me, I do think, I'm not saying I agree necessarily, but he might be the most influential person in making the NFL popular. I think you could make that argument. I'm not saying I would, I think you could.
You know what? Let's put this for a topic next week, because he certainly is on the list. Who else would be up there? A couple of commissioners, maybe a few players, but
definitely not
certainly
commissioners.
is there.
Definitely not commissioners. Maybe Pete Rozelle.
I'm the business guy.
Goodell. No one's gonna vote for Roger Goodell. All right, we got to think about that one before we talk about all right, let's put that down. Write that one down.
The Mount Rushmore of NFL media.
All right, sounds good. All right, John, as always, my pleasure. And everyone listening, thank you for listening to the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. We'll be back next week as well.
Thanks for listening.